Hello and welcome. This is a short introduction to this painting, which is catalogue number 269 and called The Battle of the Bridge. My father completed this painting around 1994, and I don't think it's been shown anywhere. I took it out of storage and had it on my wall for the last 5 or 6 months, and as with many works of art, found that one needs to live with it for a while to get to know it. And I'm still finding new things to look at in it. It caused me to look up the history of this battle, which I found fascinating, and I'm now sharing my understanding and interpretation of this painting and of that time on this platform. So I'll start by talking about the history that's illustrated here, and then about my father's treatment of the subject through the composition and techniques he used. So first of all, this is a depiction of Boudicca entering Londinium, or London as we know it now, at the height of the successful uprising of AD 60 to 61. Of the Iceni, one of the tribes in what is now East Anglia, apparently a druidic priestess, Boudicca challenged the reneging of a deal made with her husband that he had designed to secure her prosperity after his death. The uprising occurred because the Romans had not upheld their deal, which caused her to lose lands and the tribes to lose property. Refusing their increasingly outrageous demands, she and her daughters were punished on the order of Nero by terrible public humiliation, abuse, and torture. As they were so incensed with the deceit, neighbouring tribes joined her ensuing revolt, and they razed first Colchester, the Roman capital, and then turned south to London, which was becoming an important point for Roman trade. The allegedly tall monarch wore traditional Celtic clothing, a cape pinned with a brooch, throughout her campaign. She took no prisoners, and the heat from the fires can still be seen in the soil of the places that they burned. We know the story of Boudicca because it was so shocking to the Roman Empire and was still in the oral tradition when it was written down by Tacitus some 60 years afterwards. Tacitus appeared to approve of her actions and committed her to history in a positive light, unlike some of the other more sycophantic leaders he met that have followed. Boudicca means victory, and she upheld her and her tribe's values, which resonated across the Celtic kingdoms at the time, and also contributed to the delay of the Romanisation of Britain. She was resurrected in the public's cultural appreciation by Queen Victoria, who believed she was her namesake, and the alleged words to do with Britons never being slaves. This concept was widely celebrated, and now Boudicca is upheld as a great queen who in turn upheld justice. Less is broadcast about the brutality she and her followers exacted on the enemy, but it is in the records, although there are questions of the accuracy of these. Also, her final battle was a catastrophic failure, but here she is in this image, riding on the crest of her mission. So that is the background to this painting. I will now talk about the composition of this image. Firstly, it's quite large, approximately 3 feet by 2.5, and in landscape orientation. Wherever you look at this painting, you will find something interesting to see, and then notice something else. It is a fascinating arrangement that carries your eyes on a journey and your mind into inquiry. The dawn is rising in the east, where we are facing as viewers. Boudicca advances south into London, allegedly at King's Cross, over the newly built Roman bridge. We can see the battle is raging in the foreground, and her determination is in her resolute victory pose. Her chariot is armed with blades on the axles, and she is flanked by warriors with spears or possibly arrows. Her horses are both dogged and whinnying and heading right into the fighting. Behind her we see 2 more chariots, one advancing and another upturned, a casualty of the battle. On her right, in the foreground, our left, is another casualty, with a face white from shock or death. A warrior is running to finish him. The casualty is probably a Roman. He is wearing a sandal, but has been stripped of his armour. In the foreground, 2 Romans are gleefully preparing for the fight, but the one defending the bridge itself is ruefully looking up at the advancing chariot and possibly thinking about jumping off the bridge. Perhaps I should mention here that my father was in the Air Force and saw fighting in Iraq, Egypt and Sudan in the Second World War. It is very likely, or at least possible, that the display of twisted bodies and vehicles here are drawn from his memories. The style of this painting is abstract. You can see that there is stylization of every element of the painting, from the landscape to the livery, and his intention as an artist is to persuade the viewer to look beyond realism and accurate representation to suggestion. He would utilize planes and geometric shapes in order to demonstrate structure of form and to show interplay of colour and light on form. We can see Boudica, but actually she is just made up of colours placed in a certain way. This is a strong influence from Magritte and Impressionism. The shaping and placing of the elements of the painting are carefully considered according to his sense of balance. He would build up a painting from a sense of tonal relationships, and if he felt there should be a particular colour or tone in a place on the painting, he would put something there that met his requirements. Perhaps the cape of the running warrior is one example of this. The stylization of the Roman uniforms is quite sweet. The shield of a true Roman would be 4 times this size. The terrible, impenetrable armour of centuries of campaigns were not these toys depicted here, although the stabbing sword, helmet and breastplate are a little bit more accurate. For his purposes, he was just indicating the different sides of the battle and suggesting the different approaches. The vulnerable, naked Celt who relied on bravery and raw emotion versus the protected aggressors who hid behind their shields and were serving an emperor. In oil on hardboard, every element of the painting has had different treatment, mostly reflecting the quality of that which he's illustrating. For example, the grasses here are textured in alignment with their location, the stones layered in under the patterned paving, regular but stylized, not aiming to look like a Roman road, but to reference it. A final word I'd just like to say about the geometric shapes throughout the painting are part of his style, but they build up to give you an impression of this place. And I think the rising sun is an absolutely fabulous, and the landscape is utterly gorgeous. And I love the horses as well, and the chariot. And although the action is rather difficult to look at in some ways when we think about war, I think his treatment of it has been extremely interesting, and I love the fact that Boudica is here, riding on the crest of her wave before everything goes wrong. I hope you enjoyed my interpretation of this work, and please do get in touch if you would like to know more about this or any of his other paintings.